So next up is an interesting thing. Incubators were the hottest thing in the world when Y Combinator first landed and hit pay dirt, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to emulate and copy that kind of success. But we all know there's been a bit of a backlash since then, and people are wondering, wait a minute, does the incubators really work? Which ones work? Which ones don't? What parts of it work? And I think a lot of the answers are going to come out in the next panel. We know that it's an interesting area, but one with some potential pitfalls that need to be avoided. So I'd like to invite up the moderator for this next panel, somebody who's done a lot of research on the space of incubators in that kind of environment. So Matt Gardner, CEO of the California Technology Council. Matt. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Very much.
And as Matt introduced himself, I'd like to invite his panelists to slide behind him and take their seats. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. As Derek said, I'm Matt Gardner. I'm the CEO of the California Technology Council, and one of the networks that we run up and down the state is called the California Business Incubation Alliance. And about 2 years ago, we had a very interesting conversation with a large bank interested in setting up 2 of its own accelerator programs. And that resulted in a kind of a benchmarking analysis project that became this. This study was launched in May of this year on, in effect, the best practices of acceleration and comparing the acceleration business model to incubation. And as you can imagine, the lines between incubation and acceleration are pretty fuzzy. And that's one of the many things that we'll discuss with our panel. So let me start here with just asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start down the far end. And Scott, would you please let us know who you are?
Sure, I'll even stand for you, Matt. Hey everybody, I'm Scott. Longtime startup guy, 8-time founder, 6 wins, 1 catastrophic fail, and 1 zombie that doesn't seem to want to die. I came on board at CableLabs about 1.5 years ago to focus on startups and the global democratization of entrepreneurship. And as part of that, we launched a thing called UpRamp, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
Thank you, Scott. Pascale.
I guess I have to stand too then. My name is Pascale Diaine. I've been with Orange for 14 years, and 3 years ago we started an accelerator called Orange Fab, focusing on bringing back Silicon Valley innovation to the product and service of Orange around the world.
Thanks, Pascale. Faraz.
Sure, I guess I got to stand too now. Hey, everyone, I'm Faraz Hoodbhoy. I run AT&T's Innovation Outreach. I'm a startup guy. I was the founder and CEO of a company that actually pitched at Telecom Council, so it's good to be back here. Raised about $20 million in my last company, built it out to about 40 million subscribers and sold it. Then I was bumming around for a year, started to teach. I teach entrepreneurship at UC Berkeley. One day I get a call from AT&T saying I'd applied for a job. I hadn't. My wife applied for me, and that's how I ended up at AT&T.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Your wife wanted you out of the house, clearly.
Yes.
So Scott, let's start with you again and ask you to take this opportunity to tell us a little bit more about CableLabs and the program that you're running.
Yeah. Should I stand? No.
Sure.
Thanks, Matt. So here's the sort of sad truth. We think that startup accelerators are broken. Startup accelerators are great. They're awesome for 2 guys in a slide deck, and they're really good at helping people accelerate the starting up. But there is a fundamental fraud that's being perpetrated on young entrepreneurs around all of this corporate accelerator stuff. And we think that either it's due to corporate innovation theater or venture economics. And so when I came into CableLabs and said, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's no way that 2 guys in a slide deck over 3 months can invent a minimum viable product and sell it to GE. There's got to be a better way. So we came up with a thing we call the Fiterator, which is a 3-month program designed to help people find true product market fit inside of the global cable and broadband industry. So CableLabs, as you may know, represents 55 of the largest broadband and cable operators around the world. And what we do is we bring in companies that already have a product, already have customer revenue, maybe they've raised at least $1.5 million, and we take them that last mile and help them figure out how to get their product into these operators. So, you know, most accelerators, they finish with some kind of fancy demo day, right? All the venture capitalists in the region come in and rah-rah, slap your back, all that stuff. We think that's bullshit. So what we do is we focus on deals, not demo days. So companies that go through our program, they graduate with actual fundamental deals from one of the many operators that we represent. And we think that's the best way to drive innovation, real innovation, back into the industry.
Pascale, that was merde.
That was what?
Did you hear? He spoke French there. That was beautiful.
That was great. That was
Yeah.
a perfect transition.
I might
to my
drop an
part.
F-bomb, just so everybody knows.
You get one more slide there.
It's CableLabs stuff. This is stuff we do.
Okay, great.
That's more stuff we do. That's a link.
That's mine. Great. So thank you for a great transition because, I mean, at Orange Fab, we kind of feel the same way. We've been doing that for 3 years. We realized that the cycle of engagement with Orange takes a long time. So how do you keep the startup happy? How do you protect your brand? And one of the ways we do that is, it kind of happened organically, but we decided to join forces with other corporations to increase the chances of distribution and deals between the startup and Orange and their customers. And most of these brands here are actually B2B customers of Orange. And so the idea is to join forces among large brands to recruit startups, to collaborate with startups, and potentially end up with a real deal with the startups. And also to resonate with what Scott just said is we realize that early stage startups just don't know how to engage with large corporations. It's actually toxic for young startups to engage with large corporations. It can waste their time, their cash, the precious money they started raising. That's why, like Scott, we also like to focus on startups that have proven that they're strong enough and more mature enough to engage with large corporations. And here is kind of like what we use to validate if the startup is at the right stage. Existing fundraising, 500K or more, existing revenue. Maybe they already have a deal with a large corporation. Maybe they come from Y Combinator or 500 startups. And so we get this stamp from Dave McClure or Paul Graham that yes, the startup is kind of in good shape. So yeah, we also decided to kill the demo day this season. So again, an echo here. Demo days kind of are facing a fatigue phenomenon, and we are more about executive briefing by thematic based on what our corporate partners are interested in.
Demo fatigue. Excellent.
Demo fatigue.
Faraz, could you go a little deeper on the Foundry model, please?
Sure. So we have, I guess my slides aren't there, or, oops.
Oh, you went back.
Yeah, okay. Goes a lot faster. Okay, so there we go. So our model is probably a little bit different in that we're not really an accelerator. We, traditional accelerator models are ones that try to get involved into the corporate model of the company and try to encourage a company to shape itself around your business to try and align the priorities or even the product roadmaps into it. And honestly, if we really knew how to do that ourselves as big telcos, we would go out and build those ourselves. We don't know how to, and we fail every time. So trying to get super deep involved into telling startups how to run their business is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And so our model is one where we actually don't do that. We will work with companies, but we are spending much more of our energy on understanding what each of those businesses do. We sort of run it like a sales funnel. So the top of our funnel is really all the top 100 VCs, meet with each one of them 2 or 3 times a year, go through every single company in their portfolio, pick the ones that make sense to meet with, and then meet with each one of those companies and then try and take it forward to the next step. And that we're not involving any of the executives, we're not involving anyone else in that process. But we see through that model, we see about 500 startups a year. I'd say about 95, 98% of them are Series A through Series C. We will then let companies know in the first meeting whether or not, if it's going to happen or not. One of the things that we learned how to do is speak AT&T and understand that the word interesting is probably the stupidest word on the planet, and yet we overuse it. And it's not because we're bad people, it's because we're really polite, and most of the folks in our company are really nice and don't like to say no. So they say, that's interesting, and then never get back to you. We don't do that. We understand when they say interesting, does it mean I love it, I hate it, or I never want to see you again, or yeah, actually I am interested, I want to stick with it. We've learned to speak that, except that we'd make that decision for the first cut on the meetings. And then, through those 500 companies, we end up doing deals. Now, deals means proof of concepts, actual commercial rollouts, north of 10, 20 million a pop, or marketing and reseller arrangements that actually mean something to AT&T. So of the 500, we get about 60, 65 deals done a year. So our model is really get deals done. We recently started running the equity program for AT&T. That is not a traditional equity program. We don't do capital investments, because we don't think, every time we've tried to be a VC, we've failed. But the way that we run equity is through warrants, and that means we've got to align the interests of the business with both us and for them, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And so that model has been working really, really well for us. And where that ties back in, traditionally startup accelerators last 2 to 3 years in the context of a large company. We've been around for 5 years and we're funded for the next 5, so we think our model's working.
Thanks, Faraz. Appreciate that. Scott, you said something that reminds me of, I think it was a Twilight Zone episode where the guy realizes that a book that says "To Serve Man" is a cookbook.
Right.
So let me ask you about To Serve Entrepreneurs as a mission, right?
Yeah.
So we're in a kind of evolutionary stage of these accelerators all over the world, and so I'm going to ask each of you about that in a few ways, because all of your models are a little different than what started maybe 5 years ago. Scott, is your fundamental mission to support entrepreneurs or to support an outward innovation movement for your investors?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So CableLabs itself is a 30-year-old nonprofit that acts as the innovation arm of the global cable and broadband industry. So we're funded from dues from 55 of these members. So our charter is to power the innovation and science that dramatically improves people's connections to each other or to the network. So we're paid by these operators, and it's all public stuff because we're nonprofit. It's about $70 million a year to go out and build and invent and create new innovation. Now, in this world where if somebody gets a great idea today, right? Somebody at Comcast or somebody at Joe's Garage, they get a great idea. They don't bring it to their boss, right? They put it in their back pocket, they walk out the door, go raise $100,000 and do a startup. Well, that happens, I think the last time I saw the number was like 565,000 times a month in the US. It's ridiculous. So in that new world, we've got to find a way to engage this innovation that's happening in people's garages and in the Starbucks down the street, and find a way to bring that back into an industry that, to be fair, is in transition. And that's why they have us out here doing it.
Pascale, the most eloquent American president of all time, once said, "The French have no word for entrepreneur." So same question for you. Do you have a mandate that comes from Orange to serve entrepreneurs or to serve Orange's particular technology interests?
So Orange had a presence in Silicon Valley for 17 years. So we didn't start here with Orange Fab. We started here a long time ago. It was called France Telecom R&D when I started at Orange. And then we acquired Orange in 2000, and then we transitioned the brand because Orange was a stronger brand than France Telecom. So the mandate has always been kind of the same one, but we've evolved the way we execute on it. But the mandate is to identify threats and opportunities in Silicon Valley for the group around the world. We're very active in Africa, Europe. France is the biggest business unit in terms of cash generated, but we're also in Egypt, Jordan, Poland, and so on. And so the idea was, tell us what's happening, be the eyes and the ears of Orange in Silicon Valley. So we've done that multiple ways. We've done development. We've tried to find integration of the development we did here. We heard it's interesting too many times, found out that it means nothing, that integration of internal innovation is really, really hard, and that we realized that internal innovation, that we call R&D, needed a complement of external innovation, which is called Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. And so that's kind of the idea of an accelerator came by, is we saw models like Y Combinator, 500 startups starting and staying, and we thought, well, why not a corporation? Why not get a corporation to do that and have Orange take advantage of that phenomenon to challenge maybe internal innovation, and maybe after all, M&A is the new R&D. So don't really quote me on that, but that's something that is kind of coming more and more.
I will give you credit. No one has used the word disruptive yet, which I think is a tremendous credit for us, right? We haven't heard that.
Sure.
I'm going to do a quick poll here. How many of you are at companies with over $1 billion in revenue? How many of you are at startups? How many of you are investors? How many of you are some combination of more than one of those? Right, exactly. Okay, so Faraz, I want to ask you to take kind of the next leap in this. The model of the foundry is different, but each of these three examples is not the standalone accelerator that popped up 5 years ago. Can you talk about where your mandates are coming from in the partners that you've got, for example, at Ericsson here in Palo Alto and the others?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the ways that we have lasted 5 years and will last for at least another 5 years is because we cheat. And the way that we cheat is that we aren't held to the traditional P&L that is sort of the death trap of every accelerator type model within large companies. Now, look, if you did a straight up analysis of P&L, has the foundry paid for itself? Yes, we actually did look at that, and we're probably about 20,000 times more value in terms of what we've added to the business. And I don't mean that as a figurative speech. I mean actually 20,000 times the amount of money that's gone into AT&T in terms of the impact that we've had on the network, on the business, in terms of net new revenues and cost savings. But the only reason we're that successful is because we have a model where our big costs, like we have 6 locations, they are all working under a sponsorship model. So we're a small team. We're only about 80 people. The majority of us are developers, designers, engineers, people who actually get their hands dirty. So we're doing real work with startups and sometimes on our own. But the facilities, if you ever come visit us in Palo Alto, would love to have you guys over. Telecom Council used to be there a lot. They're really advanced locations and really have all the tools and toys that you can use to play with. Now, why? Because we don't pay for them. We work under a sponsorship model where our primary vendors, Ericsson in Palo Alto, Nokia in Plano, Amdocs in Israel, Cisco in Atlanta, they have really stepped up, and as a part of the prime vendor relationships that we have with these companies, they are jointly investing in our innovation arm. Now, what does that mean from an AT&T standpoint? We only pay for our people, which when you're 280,000 people, having 80 more doesn't really show up anywhere, so nobody cares about that. But what does matter is the fact that we're freed up to go and invent whatever the heck we want. So you asked, where do we get the direction from? Nobody tells us what to do, because whenever they do, we screw it up. Because we don't like to. I mean, when was the last time somebody put a gun to your head and said, go innovate? It doesn't work that way, right? So we've done some incredible work. For example, AT&T now has a drone business. That business came because 2 of my colleagues, who were just straight out of school engineers, masters from Stanford, really just cared about the drone space. They started attending every meetup at NASA, built out a whole series of interesting things to figure out what is our play within the network. We didn't know, do we have network coverage at 400 feet? So they're like, traditionally we'd have to go figure out we don't have maps of aerial coverage at 400 feet. So we took a weather balloon, tied an Android phone to it, wrote an app, and then tethered it up and threw it up into the sky to see, hey, what's our coverage like at 400 feet? I mean, literally, that's the kind of stuff that we did. And as a result of that model, because people just wanted to do it, they did a great job. Now we've got a whole full-fledged business unit that's focused on it. We're doing the same thing with AR and VR. We're doing a lot of stuff around machine learning and artificial intelligence. And that's all a function because if somebody tells you to go innovate, you're never going to do it. Find really smart people, give them the space to go figure it out themselves, and then trust them that they'll do the right thing.
So Pascale, one of the learnings that you talked about that Orange Fab has come to is to bring in startups that are a little later stage. Can you talk about how you evolved to that? And was that influenced by whether you're reporting back to the CFO or the CTO, or does that not matter in this? And the reason I ask that is we have lots of mutual friends who had CFOs at the corporate parent ask a question and the program disappears, right? So Does that come into play for you? And how did your mission evolve to select later stage startups?
Right. So just a clarification. So we've been around for 17 years. So the cost of the accelerator was really incremental. We already had the staff, the presence, we were paying a lease already. So that never was a problem. Now how we decided to evolve the program is because we observed and realized that early stage startups can't integrate or can't work with large corporations without putting their own life at stake. So we realized it's just much easier to work with a startup that has raised a Series A or a very large seed, to have this back and forth and answering these requests, these sometimes awkward requests we get from the headquarters on a specific development to be made or proof of concept to create, to be able to engage with the startup. And so what was very interesting is when we started talking to other corporations, we realized it was not just Orange or any operators, it was actually any large corporation that is trying to get engagement with entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. And that's kind of how we decided to raise the bar when it came to attracting startups. But also what was also interesting is there is an abundance of accelerators and incubators. And we wanted to avoid a direct competition with the traditional accelerators in Silicon Valley. So we like to call ourselves the post-grad of accelerators and position ourselves as the next stage before distribution with a global 500 or Fortune 500 company and just focus on biz dev and sales more than actually helping with the product itself.
Scott, that's a great example, and actually one of the things that the three of your programs have in common is that to a degree you're all de-risked, right? Because you've got multiple stakeholders helping evaluate what you're going to invest in. You've been pretty strong about saying that the accelerator model is broken.
Yeah.
If you were the entrepreneur looking at where you might go or what programs you're considering, why is a de-risked model like this a more stable environment, a better scale-up environment than maybe a standalone accelerator?
Yeah, it really depends on where you are in your life cycle, right? If I were 25 and first-time founder, and I had this great idea and a slide deck, and put a little bit of stuff together and a great team, I would go to YC or Techstars, or I'd go somewhere to help me figure out how to start up. Right? That's learning I need to have. I could do it on my own, but if I had really smart mentors who could help me figure that out, that's friggin' awesome, right? Now, let's say I'm further on, right? This is my second startup, and I've raised my A, and I've got a product that is pretty good. Like, for example, I got a company in our cohort right now. They have a stream compute platform, okay? These guys power the compute for every financial market in the world. Crazy, right? Super fast, hundreds of millions of transactions per second on this single 2U box. What they said is that they actually sold to everybody already in their financial space. So what are they going to do next? So they went looking at service providers and operators, and they didn't know anybody there. So when we saw them come into our program, we thought this is perfect. These are really smart guys, savvy entrepreneurs. They have a product that's known to work, and they just need to find product market fit inside of a brand new space. Those are the guys we want to be able to help.
So before I ask the next question, I do want to remind you that we have a mic in a couple of the aisles, and so we want to make sure that we leave room for questions, and we won't necessarily wait till the end to do that. So if you do have a question, feel free to come to the mic, and I'll keep my eyes on you, and we'll take opportunities as you feel like you have a question. Faraz, let me ask you to take that a little bit further, the kind of de-risked model. How does a corporate accelerator help an entrepreneur scale? And are you offering, for example, in the Atlanta program that you've got with Cisco, do entrepreneurs that go through that program get direct access to the market that is AT&T and Cisco as partners?
Not exactly. So startups don't go through the foundries, right? So they work with them. They may actually spend time on-premise working with us for about 30, 60, 90 days during the duration of a project, but we don't really host them. We're not a accelerator in the classic sense, right? look, our AT&T's value to a startup is one of three things. We're either a customer of it, we're a supplier to it, or we're a reseller of it. And honestly, the first is okay, but honestly, we're not looking for the best product. No big telco really is. They're looking for that which is good enough and cheap. Looking at us as a supplier, that means we're providing connectivity for your IoT solution. You're in the fintech space, you need our data. Those are things that we can help supply for you. The biggest value add of us to you as a startup is a reseller. And honestly, that is where we shine the most. We are terrible at creating new markets. We are extraordinarily good at scaling markets. So sort of the formula for us to be a reseller of a company is if you have 15 to 20, 25 Global 2000s as your customers with a price point of 200K or more and growing per year, if you have those 20, 25, we can take you to 200 in a year. And we've done that many, 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 many times. But if you have between 0 and 25 and want us to get you between 225, we're not going to add any value. So that just kind of makes it easier for it. So yes, can we help you scale? Yes, absolutely. We can't make your technology scale. That's something you've got to do, and that's part of our job to make sure that that works. But in terms of getting the business scale, oh heck yeah, that's what we do all day long.
Pascale, we talked the other day about companies that might be around Series A getting their first global customer, kind of on the other end of what Scott's talking about with companies that may have some penetration. How do you work with companies like that, and how do you make sure that they don't, on their way to that first big customer, they don't break? Because most startups are not prepared to actually execute on that first big customer.
Right, so we're trying to go to our Series A, but we still have earlier stage startups that are potentially not at that stage yet. What we do is every season, so it's a 3-month program, they get access to office space. We have a beautiful space by the Ferry Building in San Francisco. And sometimes startups use it as an extended office in San Francisco if they're based in Palo Alto or Mountain View, or sometimes as our main office if they're earlier stage. What we do from the beginning of the program is check the traction with Orange, and if we sense that the traction is strong enough and the startup is able to handle that type of relationship, we will fly these startups to Paris to meet with the right stakeholders face to face. Being so far from the headquarters can be an advantage, but also a disadvantage when it comes to relationship between startups and the stakeholders. So we facilitate these discussions. It's a week in Paris, and they get to really test the traction with the headquarters and if it's leading anywhere serious. So that's one way we do it, and we also try to integrate our corporate partners to that dynamic. And if they have a presence in Paris, we will also encourage a face-to-face meeting with our friends at Fnac, which is a distributor in France, Total, which is the energy company, and so on.
I won't speak for other panelists, but I've just realized that I've been asking the wrong telcos for investment. It's just very clear. Scott, could you talk about that scale-up process, that when you're working on helping a company get to scale, how you make sure that they've de-risked the technology enough to be able to fulfill?
Yeah. I'm not sure I have a really good answer for that one. It's, to be fair, the UpRamp program is really only about 1.5 years old. So we're still learning. We're a startup like some of the companies coming through our program. So I'm not sure I really know. I know that our big challenge is selecting the right companies up front that can operate at cable scale out of the gate, right? That's the important thing for us, is it's the selection process coming in. When we did our beta, we were talking about this backstage. When we did our beta run of this, we found one company that was really pretty strong. They were close. We helped them find that last little bit. They had done a few deals and had a couple of things going. We solved their product problem and introduced them to the right people across our 55 members, and today they're live in production at 90% of all US cable operators in a year, which we thought was a really powerful story. And again, it comes down to selection more so than can we add incredible value or insight on whether you should be this technology or that technology or something else.
So I have a measurement question for each of you. If you look at the 10-year-ago model of a standalone accelerator, some of the indicators of success were pretty simple: throughput. How many companies did you graduate? How many of them raised money, and how much did they raise? Is that, and I'll just go down the line, Faraz, maybe you can start with this, is that a reasonable indicator? And if it's not, how should we be measuring whether these programs are working?
It's a question we get asked a lot, and we decided we'll just make our own metrics that make sense for us, right? So, yes, we look at 500 companies, but it's garbage in, garbage out. You could meet with 5,000 companies and get, no results, or you can meet with 100 of them and get great results. So, to Scott's point earlier, it's about the selection process into it. So we work with really great companies because we work with the people who fund really great companies. That in turn makes us, makes the pipeline much, much better. And so the other thing that we spend a lot of time doing is talking to folks inside of AT&T to understand whether or not we're going to be able to land those companies and make the fit happen. I mean, at the end of the day, we are Tinder for technology for AT&T, right? So the only way that we're going to be successful is if we understand both participants in that. And it helps to have a team that is really mostly made up of entrepreneurs themselves. So if you look at our foundry folks and the background of the people who we've hired or who've come in, most of them are people who have an entrepreneurial background, people who've been in startups before, and as a result, they feel the pain of the companies that we're working with. So the metrics for it, for us, honestly, are ones that we thought were useful. For us, it's not about how many companies we see, it's about how many deals we get done. It's about the impact of the deals on the business. We don't start a project, and we do close to about, we've been around for 5 years, we've done close to about 470 odd projects. We don't start it unless we know that there's a $100 million impact in a 1-year time frame. And that sounds ridiculously big, but when you're AT&T and you're doing $200 billion a year, $100 million is less than a decimal point. So, you have to pick your battles so that you're actually making an impact. So the honest truth is, what works for us won't necessarily work for everyone else, but we had to pick stuff that we thought made more sense, and so we did.
Pascale, what do you think about measurement?
Okay, so that's a dreaded question for an accelerator. I would relate, you can't just count how many startups that applied, went to the program, how many you have deals with. It's not a relevant metric. So I think for us, a big metric was the visibility of Orange in Silicon Valley. We are not an operator here. We're not very known. So being able to grow our visibility, credibility among the startup community and influencer community was a great opportunity. And also what happened, to go back to the CFO discussion, is that at first when we launched the program, we wanted to be aligned with what was happening here. So we literally begged the CFO to give us a convertible note that we could offer to the startups. And interestingly enough, he was just like, yeah, $20K doesn't matter. We're used to invest millions of dollars in an operator in Africa or a big company in France. We don't really know how to deal with seed money. We don't really want to do it. We'll give you a note because you're really asking for it and the CEO is supporting you, but fine. And then after 2 years of the accelerator, new ideas kind of went to life when execs were exposed to this community of entrepreneurs, and we started a new budget, an allocated budget, not a fund, called Orange Digital Venture, where we do investment from $500K to $3 million, from seed to Series B. And that really was a game changer for the group of actually making investment under $1 million. That's actually amazing for Orange. And I think that was a great success for us. And we look at Orange Fab as a way to bring deal flow to that budget now to invest in A, B, and seed.
That's great. Scott, what do you think about the measurement question?
I could talk for an hour on this. These accelerator vanity metrics make me friggin' nuts, right? So scan rate, right? All this, we saw 900 applications and we only chose 12. Right? Fuck you. So
I've done that.
I did it. Sorry. All right, drink. So that makes me nuts. Our startups have raised, $1 billion in venture investments since we started 10 years ago, right? Whatever. How does that apply to you, right? And all of this is designed to create vanity metrics that make young entrepreneurs goo-goo-eyed over what their opportunity might be, right? We have 200 mentors. I mean, come on. So we throw all that stuff away. Now, we obviously track funding. We track all this stuff. We know how many people are in the top of our funnel. We know all of that stuff. But the important thing is that, innovation without execution is a hobby. And so what we do is we track actual deals and the dollar impact for our members on the things that they've done inside their network. Are we making money? Are we saving money? Are we dramatically improving the customer experience? And that's the stuff that really should be tracked. That's what innovation is really all about.
So I do have a few copies of this with me, and so if you'd like one, I certainly can give you the paper copy. There's a PDF version on our website as well. But among the many things that we did when we did this kind of landscape research is we not only conducted about 100 interviews of program managers, we also did dozens and dozens of interviews with program graduates.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneurial feedback was not positive, as you can imagine. And so that's pretty powerful. So do you take that feedback loop, and how do you incorporate feedback from companies who've been through previous cohorts? And Scott, maybe it's unfair to ask you that because you've only been through 1.5, but maybe you could start and we come back down the line.
You know, obviously feedback is vital and important, right? As I said before, we're a startup like the guys coming through the program. So it's important that we learn. Now, we've got lots of different stakeholders, right? We've got the enterprises, we got startups, we got venture community, we got lots of people that we're trying to serve. But if the entrepreneur doesn't feel like they got value out of this program, they didn't increase their bottom line, they didn't get deals, they didn't grow, there's no point in doing it for them, right? And obviously the same thing from our members within CableLabs. If they're not getting value from it, then you ought to shut it down.
I think the most powerful comment we had to that effect was one entrepreneur saying to us, we went through about 100 days of programs that were not about our business.
Yeah, or I spent 4 weeks doing pitch prep.
Yeah.
Right, come on.
Yeah. Pascale, what do you think?
No, I mean, we take feedback all the time. We love feedback, and that's why we've evolved to a model where we go towards distribution and biz dev, because that's where we felt the need was, and what startups keep telling us. They told us demo day was not great. The trip to France was tremendous. We got to speak face-to-face with the stakeholders of the company. Now we know if there's light at the end of the tunnel in that discussion with that stakeholder, or if we should just kill that pilot because it's just an excited person at the innovation division wanted to do the project just for themselves, not because there actually is an alignment with the business unit. So it gives them, the feedback on the French trip was just tremendous, so we kept it and we killed the demo day. So we always listen to the community.
That's great. What do you think, Faraz?
Well, look, feedback is, obviously you've got to listen or else you don't get to the next step, and people don't come back to you. Ours was again one that we picked ourselves. One of the things that we wanted to do was leverage the fact that we don't have a venture program. We need to work with the venture community to get them to invest in companies that solve problems that work at our scale and for us. And the reality is telcos are a terrible place for venture funds to put money in companies that are solving their problems because we've been terrible customers. I mean, this is true as an entrepreneur. I know this because I went to 82 VCs before I got my first term sheet, and 79 of them said no. So now when I go back to them, I kept their contacts and they're all friends still. Now when I go to them, they know that I understand their pain. The entrepreneurs know that we're not going to screw them over because we're not. We're going to give them straight up feedback. And now it's worked to the point where we are now in the diligence path of almost every one of the top, say 20 or 50 VCs in the Valley. They run their companies by us before they actually fund them. When they fund them and they're still in stealth mode and they've raised $100 million and nobody else knows about them, we know about them. So we're now earning the trust back because that's what we've had to do. We've been terrible customers, and so now our role is to improve that, and the biggest feedback for that is are companies getting invested that are focusing on the telecom space? I think the answer is yes, it's getting a lot better than it was. I know certainly if I go out and raise money now, it's a hell of a lot easier than it was when I raised it the first time.
So we only have a couple minutes left, and I do have at least one more question I'll ask our panelists. In the meantime, does anybody have a question that they'd like to fire off before we lose these folks? Can you jump up to the mic there, sir?
Hi, my name is Bernard Sled, Breakthrough Venture Partners, a former corporate VC at HP and founder of HP Startup Central, so I can relate to what you're talking about. I actually have two quick questions. The first one is you talked about the metrics. What are those? So we know what the metrics are. What are the scores on those metrics? So for instance, for each batch of 10 companies you work with, how many actually achieve something measurable? And the second question is about the filters that you use. It sounds like you work with what you call the venture community, which I think means the venture capital community. Have you considered working with companies that haven't raised venture capital and yet can bring measurable value in the telecom space?
Okay, let's take that one. Okay, so I don't have a whole lot of numbers that I can share, but this is what I'll tell you. We started a cohort in August of 4 companies. We do very small cohorts, right? And the first 45 days is all about learning. The next half is all about selling shit. And where we are today, those 4 companies have 14 POCs that are live within our membership today. So we're headed in the right direction. The engine seems to be working. That's what I can tell you today. Ask me in a couple of months and I can get more specific on that side. Have we thought about working with outside companies, maybe not venture guys, but other people who can help us build a network? We're building a very large tent. We want to work with everybody. If you've got ideas on how we can grow and drive innovation from the ground up, then let's talk, Bernard.
We've had about 40 startups going through a program, small cohort as well. 7 deals I could talk about publicly, about 6, 7 in the pipeline, not official yet. To go back to the question of would we work with an entrepreneur with no funding, the answer is yes, if it's a serial entrepreneur who's showed he can do it before and who is on its way to raise money.
Yeah, but just to qualify, the question was not about entrepreneurs, 2 people in the garage with no funding and no product. It's about companies that maybe are venture grade, but not necessarily venture backed.
For us, yes, we'll work with them as long as we know that they're. It's really the venture metric is a simple filter to know. Okay, they've probably done something right to have gotten to that point. So at least we can now go a couple steps further. Now, does that mean we write off everybody? Hell no. We actually try to go to what is the product? Is it really good? We've met lots of great companies who were self-funded. Actually, some of them who started, hitting revenue from the get-go. Somebody had a rich founder who put in his own money into it, and they're good to go. Great.
So I'm going to ask you for a one-line parting thought because we're out of time. Each of you, if you could. If you could forecast 5 years forward, one of the things that we've seen, for example, is that a lot of these programs are now formally linked to corporate venture, right? So that some of these programs are coming together now under the same open innovation strategy. If you could forecast 5 years forward, what does corporate acceleration look like for us? One line.
Companies like working with telcos.
Pascale?
One innovation division per business unit.
Come on, Scott.
Yeah.
Throw an Effenheimer in there to make it interesting.
I might.
Don't
Shit
throw
the piss.
Don't throw it in the
I don't know. I think this whole thing is about to change. I think that corporate-backed accelerators, I think, are just going to die a slow, painful, ugly death over the next 5 years. And all of this focused on 2 guys in a slide deck stuff will go to the guys who are good at doing 2 guys in a slide deck. And the corporate guys will follow what you're doing and will build a model that can actually help companies sell into an enterprise. That's where I think it's going. And so I think a lot of the innovation theater is going to die out as it does in these sort of cycles that we've seen here in Sunnyvale.
I'm glad you were willing to step out a little bit, Scott. Would you join me in thanking our panelists, please? Thank you very much to all of them. Derek, let me pass back to you.
Great. Thank you very much.